The Marching Roundtable is proud to be an official media partner of Drum Corps International.
This podcast is sponsored by GuardCloset.com, a resource to buy or sell used guard equipment and uniforms, found at GuardCloset.com.
If anybody followed it this summer, they knew, like, oh my gosh, this was a great summer. Like, these are the corps I want to see, and there was, like, no disappointment when you saw them. But, yeah, I mean, it was just a great year, and I think Drum Corps is on the right path. And they're figuring out, like, okay, this didn't work a couple years ago, or, like, we're finessing it to the point to, like, this is working. And I know can be a lot of naysayers about certain aspects of it, but when it comes together for a show, I feel like it's working because it's more about how it's impacting the audience emotionally, and I feel like that's what they're starting to master.
This is Tim Hinton, and all summer I kept hearing, it's a great year for Drum Corps. Super competitive, crowd-friendly shows, amazing performances. Both John Bogenschutz of Tone Deaf Comics and I were in Indy, and on this podcast, we talk about trends in the activity, great moments in shows, and corps that audiences were in love with.
Yeah, it's really good, but Tim, I'm going to tell you what, that wasn't my favorite moment of their show. My favorite moment was the beginning of the ballad and looking forward to every night hearing the entrance and just how crystal clear it was. Like, it was like an absolute recording every single night, and they sounded perfect every single time with that entrance, and I loved it.
If you enjoyed this conversation between John and I, you can hear 5 more shorter podcast conversations about the DCI season, available to supporters of the Marching Roundtable and Tone Deaf Comics on Patreon. If you give as little as $2 a month, you can hear these other special podcasts at patreon.com. Just search for the Marching Roundtable or Tone Deaf Comics at patreon.com. Our DCI 2018 wrap-up podcast on the Marching Roundtable. This podcast is sponsored by GuardCloset.com. GuardCloset.com is your resource for performing arts organizations to sell their used guard equipment and uniforms to raise funds for their programs. You can also save money for your program by purchasing these quality used items today. GuardCloset.com is populated with more than 1,000 sets of flags, guard uniforms, props, band uniforms, and floor coverings. Buy used, save money. Sell your gear, make money with GuardCloset.com. Hey everybody, welcome to the Marching Roundtable podcast. This is Tim Hinton talking to the wonderful and hilarious John Bogenschutz. John, how are you?
Hey Tim, good.
No pressure to be hilarious, John.
Yeah, the what?
No pressure to be hilarious.
No, there's not. Don't worry. It's not going to happen.
I'm in on your... Let's just get rid of that expectation right now.
Yeah.
No, it was fun to see you. We were both in Indy. It was great to see you. You were there with your wife and one of your sons, and we had a really good time.
Yeah, it was fun. It was good to catch up.
Yeah, absolutely. And you and I got to have lunch, and we did a Facebook Live video, which anybody can find on my Facebook page or on the Marching Roundtable Facebook page, and it was fun.
Yeah.
I think it was a really good year for Drum Corps. Like, that's what you kept hearing the whole summer. Everybody kept talking about, wow, everybody's so entertaining. Everybody seems to have got it figured out. It's such a good year for Drum Corps. I guess you felt the same way?
Yeah, and it does feel like that we say that more and more each summer, too. Like, I can remember summers where it's like, it is what it is. But then it feels like consistently, at least for me and my wife, we're every year we're like, these are great shows. Like, there's so many great shows this year, and this was no exception to that.
Yeah, I had a bunch of conversations with different people all over the weekend, and a lot of those are available online on social media and stuff. But some of them will be released on podcasts as well. But to me, it was sort of like, I feel like there's been a lot of upheaval the last few years. There's all this new costuming, there's amplification, there was all these props, and it all seems sort of unwieldy. And I feel like this year it seemed like everybody sort of figured some things out, and it didn't seem like all of that new technology was in the way. It seemed sort of like they figured out how to use it better.
Yeah, it's kind of like bad CGI in a movie. You're like, oof, boy, like this is CGI. Right. But when there's good CGI in a movie, it's like, okay, I don't notice it.
Exactly.
Like it definitely helps, but I don't notice it.
Right. And I might even be somebody that says, you know what, I would like this movie better if they did some of these, if it wasn't so much CGI and they actually did some real stunts or whatever, so I guess we can apply that to Drum Corps too sometimes. But overall, I feel like there were big crowds. Everybody was excited. There was a lot of excitement about, like the top 6 was the talk the whole season about. Just the top 6 was so strong. I really do think anybody in the top 6 could have potentially won, or certainly could have been in the top 3.
Definitely.
And I feel like the judging somehow sort of started to call them out and separate them as the season went on, which I guess happens. But I feel like, Cavies in Boston 5 and 6, I just, they went on and you're like, holy cow, that's 6th place,
Yeah.
I mean, because it was just amazing, the level of design, the level of performance, what the students are doing. It's exciting.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And the Cavaliers was one of those shows that first time I saw, like, okay, it is what it is. And then, like, the second time I saw, I was like, I really like the show. And then the third time, I'm like, holy crap, I love this show.
Yeah, there's a lot in there. That's one of those shows that I think you have to sort of discover over time, really. There's so much in it, and there's so much going on. Yeah,
they've got little quotes throughout the show that you hear them each time. And every night, Shelly, my wife, was like, I think they threw that in for tonight. I was like, I don't think so, but I just think you got it for the first time tonight.
Yeah.
But there's so many times that happened to me, too. Like, I didn't hear that the last time.
Yeah, and that's a great example of a show that had a lot of that. They would throw in these little bolero licks here and there, and there were all these quotes that tied everything together. But it was, it didn't seem inaccessible, but it was very detailed and complicated in a way that's very positive. There's a lot there to see.
Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah,
it was one of my favorites.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess I should say we're not going to be able to talk about and review every show as much as we would love to, but nobody wants to hear us talk for the next 5 hours. But we're going to have a bunch of discussions. We're actually going to do some extra discussions for our Patreon supporters. So anybody that's a Patreon supporter of Tone Deaf Comics or Marching Roundtable, we're going to put some special sort of DCI review podcasts up there. If you just support us, what, $2, right? That's all they have to do?
Yeah, $2 a month. And what we've been doing, not only with the DCI stuff, but we've been doing 4 like mini podcasts a month. So I think they're 15 minutes in length, and you get those if you support us at the $2 level.
Yeah, it really does make a difference. So thanks everybody that's supporting us. So I feel like we have to talk about Santa Clara first, just because, although we just talked about Cavies because they were awesome. But Santa Clara was the talk of the season. There's no question that the show, everybody loved. It was interesting to me because it was like, it seemed really innovative, really new, really daring, but everybody loved it. Like nobody that seemed really put off by it.
Yeah, it was. Santa Clara is always one of those cores where we live around the Cincinnati area that we never ever get to see or even see and rehearse until finals week. Like, we don't get to see them until the shows. So we were extremely anxious and excited to see them this year, and it did not let us down at all.
Yeah, it was such a complicated show, and it was so new, and the use of the prop was so integrated but so complicated. I don't know. It just seemed like a miraculous thing to have something that was so accessible and loved by people, but also so new and innovative.
Yeah, and you and I talked about this a little bit. Like, there's so many aspects of that show that they did right, and I'm sure, like, if they used these props another year, it may not have worked out. But this year, everything worked out with the theming of the show, the props. The props are multi-use props, and that's, in my opinion, you have to have props that are multi-use anymore. Like, you can't just have something sitting on the field and just use it once, in my opinion. Like, they took advantage of how to build these props, how to fit them in together, how to Lego stack them, do all this stuff with them, and use them in different ways, like running through them, using them as cages, standing on top of them, using them as ramps. They figured out and obviously sat down and took a lot of time to figure out how they want to use these.
Well, and that's the thing I always tell people is you have no idea how much time they took thinking and figuring that out. And Michael Gaines, of course, the drill guru genius, I guess we could call him, who created the drill for them, the visual package. Michael Gaines, who has had, everybody knows his great work with Cavaliers and all the world championships and all the Winter Guard stuff and everything. He said this was the most complicated, challenging thing he had ever created, because of all, we don't even, if it's so well done, you don't even notice it, but they're, he said, well, you guys can listen to this. We're going to be releasing the interview I did with the design team. It'll be on a podcast coming out soon. But, he talks about how he had to check with him and say, okay, can I take 2 baritone players for this phrase to move this prop over here? Like, it was so detailed into how everything had to move. And as you're watching it, you don't even notice that somebody stops performing for a minute because that movement is integrated as part of the show so seamlessly. It was, a lot of times in shows, and this is what's so hard for designers and drill writers, and I have these conversations all the time. If you have to move a prop, it's like everything stops, and then there's all these people trudging it across, and it becomes like this big obstacle and this big like eyesore. Yeah. And they managed to do the exact opposite. Yeah, right. Exactly. I think my best example of like how you're talking not to do it is I always think back to it was like, I can't remember when it was, but it was Seattle Cascades moving timpani across the field during the middle of the show. Yeah. And you just watched them, and that was not the focus. So, but it's hard. That's what's so thing is what's the thing to me is it's so hard to do this to make it seem so seamless and not even notice. And all these top cores did this, right. The Blue Devils had lots of props that they moved around and reorganized during the show, but they always helped you focus somewhere else while they're moving, or the movement of them made sense for what's happening visually. It's so hard to do. And there were also
with Blue Devils, like you made a good point with that. Like I'm sitting here trying to remember if I even saw one person move those props, but clearly they moved because they all started apart and then they came together. But I never remembered ever watching anybody move those props. So they did a magician's trick to put our eye somewhere else as they move those props.
Yeah, and I mean, like I keep saying, is anybody that's a designer, you just need to study these shows and see, like, what are they making us focus on while this is happening? And it's happened with all these top groups. I mean, you don't really think about the big chairs moving in the Blue Coat show. You don't really think about the Boston, they're reorganizing props and spelling things out and all that. It's so well integrated and so perfectly seamlessly done. It's just my hat's off to them. It's so hard. And I know the typical DCI fan doesn't. And of course, all of this, they're playing this ridiculously hard music, and the color guard is excelling at a level, and the drums, like, it's ridiculous. I do want to go back to one more thing about Santa Clara. There were a couple of moments in that show that were so satisfying to me. Certainly, everybody loved the moment in the ballad hit. Yeah. And, at that moment where they pop the horns up and they've had this long build, there's the pop horn, and then they play the hit. And it was exciting because I knew going into finals night, I thought, I can't wait to see what happens to the crowd tonight. Yeah. Like, how many standing O's are they going to get during their show? And that was certainly a moment where that ballad hit came. Oh, yeah. And the whole crowd was on its feet. It was so exciting.
But what makes that ballad hit, and we've talked about this, is the drill before it.
Yes.
Is that fast-paced drill with the music, like...
Well, the music too, right. The combination of the two.
Right, yeah, it's the combination. But if they were just slow marching to that spot and everything, you would not feel that tension. And that's another Michael Gaines. The whole design team put that together.
Yeah, it's genius. Everything about, if you watch that moment, everything about what's the guard doing, what's the drumline playing, how is it being staged, how are the props moving, it just all came together. And I feel like also at the end of that show was so satisfying. I got so emotional every time because, they have the two guard people that started the show. They sort of come together to meet in the center. And as we see them reaching toward each other and moving closer and closer, the snare line is just marching straight up the 50 in the middle. Like, that was just so brilliantly orchestrated and satisfying. And then they hit, and there's this moment, and I've got tears in my eyes, and I'm just thinking, this is why I love marching arts and band and drum corps. Like, they created this moment that I'm never going to forget that.
No, that it was a great show, and they performed like all 3 nights I saw them. Like they sound great in prelims, and then semis. It's like, oh my gosh, they sound better than last night. And then finals, it was like impeccable. It was like so convincing of how good they were.
Yeah.
Like when they announced second place, usually there's like this big uproar of like everybody losing it because of they knew who won. But everybody knew. And like it was like one of the quietest second place announcements ever.
Well, and part of that too is they won every caption but guard. You know?
No, right. That too, right.
I mean, so we did have a clue.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's the other thing. They were so dominating, you know, and like when you win horn line and drum line and visual and GE and like you're just like, holy cow, they just dominated. It was remarkable. And I have to mention the Vanguard cadets went open class.
Oh yeah,
like
that's
Santa
right.
Clara just ruled in this weekend. I mean, really, what a year for that organization.
Right, and to put a cherry on top of all this, it wasn't like, as you stated at the beginning, like this was a year of like weak cores. Like there are so many strong cores, like Blue Devils, Blue Coats, all of them. They easily could have won any other year.
Oh, yeah.
And they could have even won this year.
Yeah.
But
I would say this has got to be the best top 6 ever. And clearly, in my opinion, any of the top 3 could have won. It's just Santa Clara had this like special pixie dust magic thing happening. But, you know, you talked about Blue Devils. I really liked the Blue Devils shows this year. And to me, the special part was the whole Natural Woman. You guys can hear a conversation I had with Scott Chandler, who's the genius behind coordinating the show. And I asked him about that. I told him that literally I saw an early recording full marching of them, a performance. And from that point on, the whole summer, I've been singing Natural Woman.
So have I.
I mean, seriously, I'm walking the dog and I'm going down the street. I feel like a natural. And I'm like, what am I doing? You know, what do my neighbors must think? I've been singing this song all summer.
They're all in their house. They're like, this bozo's out on the street again.
Well, my neighbors probably don't have any. I think they've got me figured out. That doesn't shock them anymore. But here's this guy with a little white fluffy dog singing Natural Woman as he goes down the street. But it was so infectious. And I loved it because that show and the Harlem Nocturne part, it all felt so Blue Devils-y, you know? Like, I think people just felt like, this feels like the Blue Devils, you know? Like the Blue Devils we all love with the jazzy swagger thing. I can't say swagger, that's a cabbie's word. But you know what I mean? Like there's this jazziness to it that felt real familiar. Right.
It worked for them. And they kept it modern, but they had that Blue Devils feel.
Yeah, and I totally love that Natural Woman thing. And I talked to Scott about that. As like I said, you can hear that conversation. It's going to be out in the podcast. But, you know, I was asked him, like, the feel of the way that the guard is dancing. There's the girls in those sort of man's shirt dress things, and then the guys, and there's this freedom to it. And Scott said that they're moving with a sense of abandon. And I think that's what the song wants. Like when you hear that song and it gets really lilting along, that's how you expect yourself moving, you know. And of course there's all that hairography going on, which is super cool. And you know, like there's all these elements, but the way that they were able to create this moment of abandon, like that's great. That's just great theater. That's great performance. You know, that I felt that from the whole core, you know, the way the girls are dancing across the stage and for them to create just that right feeling of motion and movement and abandon, and that is just a remarkable achievement. I mean, and only the Blue Devils can do that kind of thing, really. That's like their thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, they just do that. And the way that some of the dancing that those male guys, when they had that part, they had the fedoras and I guess the smooth criminal part, but like, I just can't believe that they can move like that and not end up in the hospital. Like it's just, it's remarkable.
There was definitely like the body movement in that show and the color guard stuff was phenomenal. And you and I talked at PF Chang's about one of my favorite moments during that show is just like, it's like one of the last hits of the show, and the male color guard, they're spinning rifles in the diner, and then the females, they're just like sitting and doing like leg work, but they're just like enjoying the crowd out of performing it. And it's just so satisfying to watch. Just because they're just like, we're dancing, we're sitting down, we're dancing, and we're enjoying it. And this is great. And they have the confidence to do it.
Well, and the team knows that that's just what the music in the moment needed. You know?
Yeah.
And I think people sometimes, they try to do too much. You know, and of course, what we're talking about, I think it was way harder for them to pull that off than we were sort of making it out to be.
Right.
Because I'm sure those ladies doing that legwork was really hard and with impeccable form and, you know, all that stuff.
But got to have some core
like if I did it, nobody would want to see it. No, well, that goes without saying. But I do think that that's the thing about the Blue Devils this year. It was like, this is just the right thing for this moment. They just kept doing that the whole show, and I just think that's really hard to do.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so everybody knows how much I love the Blue Coat Show. I've been talking about that the whole summer. I've done so many interviews with that staff because I thought that just, to me, Session 44, this whole sort of thing about being a recording session, and they had the singer that was so beautiful, and the chairs, which made sense for a recording session theme, like the whole thing, and the outfits with all the different patterns. Like, I just dug every bit of it. And people can hear lots of interviews with me talking to the staff about how did they accomplish that? How did they accomplish the uniform thing? How did they, you know, I talked to Doug and Tom about how they wrote those music arrangements and why it works. And listening to them talk about putting it together is so interesting. So if you guys haven't heard that podcast, please check that out. But I just feel like, I don't know how the Blue Coats did not win. You know what I mean? Like, this is what I'm talking about. This has to be the best third place score ever.
Yeah, right, exactly. And it's not by far, but it's my favorite Blue Coat show ever.
Me too.
And it's just so good.
I dug it.
It was like perfectly put together.
Yeah, I mean, everything about the way it looked, to the way the pacing of the arrangements, you know, we talked a lot about that on that podcast about how, you know, they sort of pieced it together in a number of different ways, but the way that it moves from one thing to the next is just incredibly well paced and constructed.
Yeah. Yeah, and you sit down and listen to this core, and it's like, this is the core that did not win High Brass?
Yeah, I know.
It's like, holy mackerel, are you kidding me?
Well, and then, talk about Carolina Crown. How did Carolina Crown not win High Brass? Like, that horn line, I'm going to go on record and say that the most beautiful thing I heard the whole summer was that chord at the end of the ballad of Crown's show. That was the most beautiful sound I may have ever heard on a drum corps field. Like the sonorities of it, the way Michael Klesch voiced that, the way that Matt Harloff and his team got the sounds, that it was so richly balanced, and the tone. Like, I just sat there thinking that's maybe the most beautiful sound I've ever heard on a field.
Yeah, it's really good. But Tim, I'm going to tell you what, that wasn't my favorite moment of their show.
Oh.
My favorite moment was the beginning of the ballad and looking forward to every night hearing the entrance and just how crystal clear it was. Like, it was like an absolute recording every single night. And they sounded perfect every single time with that entrance. And I loved it.
Well, and so exposed.
Right,
you know,
exactly.
I mean, like, they were just putting it right out there. Okay, we have all these female horn players. They're right out front. You know, they've let their hair down. We can see that they're all females. And then you know, it was just so perfectly pure. And I would say it's a super ballsy moment, but I guess I can't say that since it was all females. Okay, I can't believe I just put that on tape. But you know what I mean? Like, it was so gutsy.
Yeah.
To just,
gutsy.
Everything stops and those beautiful female performers make those entrances. And you're right. It was just magical. It's so exposed, so hard. Yeah.
It is just so beautiful and, like, perfectly played.
I thought you were going to say your favorite part, because the other thing we talked about, we mentioned this, you and I had lunch at P.F. Chang, which was a really highlight, but, of the weekend for me, but that there's a part in the opener where
oh, yes, that too.
That was so well played and so well arranged. I love that moment.
It's so simple, and that's what I love about it. Is that, and one, because Carolina Crown's playing it, so if it's simple, they're going to nail it. And I know it's.
Well, and I got to tell you, hand that out to a bunch of seventh grade trumpet players, that's not going to sound.
No, right, exactly. and I know the simplest stuff is the stuff that can fall apart the easiest, but just how simple that line was and how great they sounded playing it, I look forward to that too every night.
Yeah. Just fantastic sounds coming out of the corps.
Yeah,
and I mean, the whole
unisons,
corps performed so well. I mean, I thought the guard was wonderful. I love the way the corps looked. I love the color palette of the greens with the browns and the yellow and the orange accents and stuff. I just dug the way the corps looked, and the whole feel of the beast thing. And so anyway, I mean, here we're talking about, and somehow they didn't medal. Like, how is this possible? You know, and then we talk about Boston, and we have to start. No offense to anybody at Boston. We have to start the conversation with Boston about the color guard, because they won the High Color Guard Trophy, and the whole summer, everybody been talking about it. Can you believe Boston's guard? Can you believe Boston's guard? And then you see it, and you're like, holy cow, like, they're doing these ridiculous, you know, let's just all do 2 turnarounds under a toss and just keep on going like it's nothing. You know, like, it was the level of achievement, and of course, playing the characters of the Maroon, like the whole, I bought the whole thing, hook, line, and sinker. I just thought the whole core was wonderful, but that color guard, it's just unbelievable. Just how in the world did they get them to do that?
It's a really good show, and there's no doubt that color guard was like top notch.
Unbelievable. And that's a show that everybody loved. Like, everybody loved it. Like, my grandmother would love that show. Like, everybody gets that show, and it's so accessible, and yet it's great drum corps. It's good storytelling, and storytelling that wasn't overly contrived or corny. Like, it all worked, and it's hard to do that.
Right. Yeah. Like, you get the concept right out of the bat with the costuming, with that beautiful tarp on the side of the field. I love the way that looked. Like, I haven't seen any Boston Crusaders videos or anything at all this year until that point. I was like, holy mackerel. Like, I really like that tarp over there.
Well, and then we have to jump ahead. The end of the show where they have these waves come over and everybody's gone. Like, that's just magical. It was so beautifully done. And I loved the way the show looked and the props, like the cool compass that turned, and they used that with every different part of the corps, ended up over there at some point utilizing that prop. It was so interesting. And the fire, which of course we had seen the fire the year before, but it was so smartly done. I loved, did you notice how she put the fire out at the end of the show?
I know it went out at some point during the show, right?
It went out at one point, but at the very end, as they're leaving and they're being rescued, there's a girl with this beautiful bowl, and she it looks like she's pouring water, and the fire goes out and smoke comes out. It was just amazing stagecraft. That was just remarkable. Everybody involved in creating that moment, from the props people to the guard people to the design people, like, that was such a satisfying, a beautiful moment, like, I just so appreciate how hard that was to do and how much it meant when you saw it.
Right, because I like the emotion or like the symbol of, like, we're done here. Like, we're done with this part of our life.
It was so clear and so satisfying. Like, it was just such a beautifully constructed, and of course they played like crazy. And, just remarkable. And everybody loved that they had some Amazing Grace and Hallelujah, like all these themes that were familiar. So I felt like it was such a crowd-friendly show.
Well, can we just say right now, like, we're sitting here talking about the color guard. We're talking about the theming of the show, the percussion and the horns. Like, oh my gosh, like, this is what you expected going into the season. Yeah. Like, the brass was great last year. They're going to be phenomenal. And they were, but they were so, like, there were so many great parts to that core that they just all blended in with that.
Okay. And then we have to say it. Somehow they end up in 5th place. Like, this has to be, I'm going to keep saying this over and over. This has to be the best 5th place score of all time. Like, how did any of these top 6 not medal? I think there really should have been six medals. I mean, and then how great were the cadets? Like, everybody loved the cadets this year. They seemed very cadetsy.
Yeah. Yeah. We went and watched them the second to last day of Every Days, and we left. I'm like, that's a cadet show.
Yeah.
Like, that's the cadet show that not miss, but like, that's what the cadets type show that I fell in love with.
Yeah, that's what we want to see. And they're playing the whole singer at the end, which is so fantastic. And that ballad was so gorgeous. And, they gave us a lot of nods to things that were very like cadets, They formed the Garfield G at the beginning. And of course, they gave us the very satisfying Z pull at the end. And like, people, I got to tell you, when I was in Atlanta, I actually sort of got a little fearful because the woman behind me, when the Z-pull happened, I literally thought she was having a stroke and was about to throw herself out off the upper stands. We were up high. And I mean, I literally thought this woman is about to, I mean, I didn't know, was she killing a chicken back there? Like, she was crazy. Just literally lost her mind. But the thing that, one, I loved it. I mean, I don't mean to make fun of her because she was so moved by it and so thrilled. And I literally thought, you know, what is going on behind me? I started to fear for my life, but she was so thrilled. And I kept thinking, this is what drum corps can do. You know, like, look what it's doing to this crowd. You know, it's like, the guy sitting next to me in Atlanta, I didn't know these people. And the Bluecoats do this thing at the beginning of the show where they look like they're forming a front and all the horns come up and then it just disperses and the mellophones start their lick. And I got to tell you, I haven't heard that big a laugh. He just thought, he was like, oh, I thought, my God, I'm sitting next to Santa Claus. Like he was having the time of his life. And this is what I keep saying about the whole season. Like everywhere I went and the people I sat around, everybody seemed to just be so happy and having so much fun.
Yeah.
You know, and then you get to Blue Stars and they're playing the Carpenters and they're dressed as Carpenters. And, you know, to me, it was a little challenging that they all were dressed the same, but I see how it worked and why they did it. And holy cow, that corps was performing, like they marching and playing. Can you believe what they sounded like? Like that horn line? Holy crap.
Well, I remember last year too, like, cause Blue Stars will surprise me. Just because I don't know why, but I remember last year they turned around and played. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I was not expecting them to sound that good.
Yeah.
And they sounded phenomenal this year.
Yeah, the horn line was just remarkable. And of course, I'm not a drum guy. I know the drums were great too. But that Blue Stars horn line this year, it was just incredible, the level of achievement, that whole corps. You know, and here we are again, we're talking about, what, 7th, 8th? I don't even know where we are in the line. It doesn't matter. But it's like, you know, the level of excellence and entertainment, and people so loved that show.
Right.
And then, of course, since we're going down the list, Blue Nights.
Yes.
Amazing. You loved this show.
I don't know why, but like my love affair with Blue Nights continues. Since 2013, I've just loved every single one of their shows. And I think a lot of it, so let me back up a second. I was really fearful for this year, because their brass staff left to go to Phantom. And I was like, oh, no.
They did have a lot of upheaval in their staff and administration this year.
Yeah, but I had no idea who was coming into their brass staff. And for some reason, I never looked it up. But holy cow, these cats can still play. And they sounded phenomenal. And that was like the most impressive part for me, was like they were playing Rite of Spring. And I typically don't really care for Rite of Spring on the field. I love the piece, but for some reason, I don't know why. Something just doesn't work for me.
It can go badly really easily. It can.
I thought they pulled this off. Like they took out some of the stuff that you expect, like the jump, all that stuff. But it totally worked for what they were. The theme of the show, the fall and rise of Ra, or whatever, it was the Fall and Rise, obviously Egyptian type theme,
right.
But it fit with what was going on.
Well, and part of that is
the music. I fell in love with.
Right, but that's J-Bo Cook. I mean, J-Bo Cook has been for years and years one of the very top arrangers in our activity. And Jay, I think the work for that show from him was just genius this year. Like it was so well orchestrated. And like you said, he took familiar things and did all these really interesting things with them. So it didn't feel like he was departing from the Stravinsky, but it still felt fresh. That's hard to do.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I kind of got sidetracked on my point. That's the reason I think I've fallen in love with Blue Nights, not only because of the brass, but Jay Bocook he's probably the best arranger in terms of like show direction and overall arc to the show. And he did that again with this show. And he's been doing that with Blue Nights.
Yeah, he's just always great. And the nicest guy. You know, I was happy to get to run into him in Indy and shake his hand and tell him how great I thought his work was, because that to me, Jay is what made the show work. Well, and the other thing that made the show work is I think the Blue Nights drum major, his name is Daniel Belcher. I met him when I was out in Arcadia at the symposium out there. I did a bunch of interviews and stuff from there. And the Blue Knights were there that day, sort of like in residence. And I met him and did an interview with him. But I got to tell you, what an impressive young man. What a great conductor and drum major. And he had to take on a lot of responsibility in the Corps this year. He's agreed to do a podcast with me to talk about that. So everybody watch for that. A podcast with the Blue Knights drum major, Daniel Belcher. Great, great guy. Nice. But I enjoyed watching him conduct just the show, like when I was in India, I just thought, I'm just going to watch Daniel for a while because he's just really expressive and I think he's really great. So anyway, I mentioned him because he's going to be on a podcast.
Awesome.
Okay. So believe it or not, we made it to the other most talked about Corps this season, Mandarins. And everybody talked. I mean, they were the talk other than Santa Clara. I think Mandarins were the talk of the season.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I just saw, I don't know what poll this was on, but they were like the fan favorite for this past year.
And the thing was like, I don't know, like the Mandarins just have this vibe about them that's just really uniquely them. And they have had that for years. And it's like this year it all just came together. This great production, incredible, here they are in finals. And there was no question early in the season they were going to be a finalist,
Yeah, right.
It just seemed predestined. And the show was wonderful and so creative. And it was so much fun to watch.
Yeah, and who was it? Somebody was sitting with me, and they're like, yeah, like 2 Corps playing Rite of Spring. Even though Mandarins, the show's called Life Right After, they don't play Rite of Spring at all.
There's a couple little things, but that's not really – but the show is themed to the dancer who dances herself to death in Rite of Spring, and that's their departure point. I got to tell you, that's the thing I thought was so great about their show was that at the beginning, we just watch her dance and everything is basically just stopped and they just make us wait. And I just thought it was so smart and so gutsy to say like, okay, we're going to make this point. She's dancing. Nothing's happening, and I loved it. I just thought it was fantastic pacing and showmanship. And then she dies and here come whatever the guard, these ghouls, these demons, whatever. And like the whole thing goes. I loved that they took that creative risk and made us all sort of sit and wait. Because an audience will do that at the beginning of a show. They'll be patient early. And if you try to do that in your closer, forget it.
Right.
But I felt like that was so masterfully done and the way that they orchestrated it to make it work. I loved it.
Yeah. And the dancer was using some like original dance moves from Rite of Spring. Correct?
Oh, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised.
I don't know that much about dance stuff, but I'm pretty sure she threw in some of those like knee points towards each other that like everybody was like at first. Yeah, that's the exact term. But I think they used some of them that like threw like people in the audience off like, this is absurd.
Yeah, the stuff that caused the riot. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
What is this girl doing here? No, you're absolutely right. She was wonderful. And anyways, and of course we have talked about this giant rotating stage and how creatively that was used in so many different ways. Yeah. Actually just the feat of getting that around all summer and it's still working is that may be the most miraculous part of it. But you guys need to listen to, again, this will be on a podcast really soon. I did all these video interviews. You can hear them right now at marchingartseducation.com for free. Just go in and watch them. But the Mandarin staff, they talk about how hard that stage was. You don't realize how hard it was to perform on. There were a million variables based on the spinning that impacted the performers. And it was so much more hard to do than it looked.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine.
Like even the thing, like you have a bunch of people on the stage, the people toward the center are turning slower than the people on the outside edge. I never even thought about that. So everybody's having to adjust individually to make like a rifle work or drumming. Like it's just amazing how hard that was. And I don't think people, of course, if you do it right, people don't think about it, but that was hard. Like that was, they spent a lot of extra time figuring that out.
Yeah. But also think about too, like, drum corps is sitting there and rehearsing the same thing over and over and over again. They have to have had special time on that thing because it's not something you can just like, let's warm up this part in the lot tonight. It's like, no, we have to have that. Or, like,
well, yeah, exactly. I asked them that. I said, did you always take the stage out to every practice? And they're like, we had to. Like they literally couldn't do the show without it because of the way it was designed and how integrated it was. Anyway, Cause, I'm thinking, well, let's leave that baby on the truck for a day, but no, like they had to have it and somehow they figured out how to make that all. But I loved so much about their show. I loved the light up rifles. I loved the story and the costuming, and I just thought it was great.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what they do next year. Like, I don't think they're going away.
No. I mean, are you kidding? And of course, Key Poland writing the music. I mean, if you're wondering where's the pedigree, like there's a giant chunk of it right there. He's been around forever doing fantastic work. And anyway, I was so impressed with them, and everybody was so happy for them. You know what I mean? Like I was down underneath in the bowels on finals night, the bowels of the stadium. Somehow, I don't know how I ended up down there. And their guard came walking in to warm up, and like everybody's clapping for him. Like everybody was just so happy for them and felt like it was so well deserved.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, out there, like when they came on the field, the audience standing ovation, and it lasted for a while.
Yeah, everybody loved them. Everybody loved what they did.
Yeah.
Everybody was happy to see them. And it's always exciting to have a new core make it into the top 12, and especially one that everybody just adores their show so much. It reminded me of, a couple years ago when the Academy made it in, and everybody loved that show so much. And everybody was so happy that they were rewarded for a show that we all loved so much. I feel like Mandarins had the same kind of thing, certainly a different kind of show, but just kudos to them.
Yeah.
So, finishing out top 12, we have Phantom Regiment and Crossmen, both fantastic. Corps, again, how can we be at the bottom of the top 12 and have Corps performing at this level? It's really amazing.
Right. Yeah. The moment for Phantom for me, and my oldest son, he's a tenor player, so this perked him up, was when they had how many tenors out at near the beginning of the show, or in the opener, they had like 12 tenors or something like that. But the surprising part for me was how girthy that sound was. Like it became this big, like not booming, but like, big, thick sound of like drumming going on. I liked it. I liked that part a lot.
Yeah, there were a lot of creative things in it. I'm not sure about the use of their prop. That worried me for them. I'm not sure how that worked out for them. But, that's the thing about design is you make chances, you try something, But I felt like the Corps, was great. I mean, I love the regiment. That's my Corps, and a lot to be proud of there. And then, of course, the Crossmen, another year in finals, another really great show. And I was so excited. I love Funeral for a Friend. And I always thought that's such a great way to start a show. And there it was,
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we just have time to talk a little bit about all these other corps. I just want to mention some. Of course, we have to mention Spirit. I feel like Spirit is doing everything right. Everybody just loves, they seem like Spirit. Everybody's liking what they're doing. I mean, they really had a viable chance to make it in, end up 13th, but I don't think any of them are disappointed because
it's a tough year.
Well, not only that, but I think Spirit is like the poster child of how to revive a corps and bring them back. And, they just seem to be doing everything right. And, they were definitely could have been a finalist. It was just a great show.
Right.
I would say knocking on the door of finals. But since the show was about knocking, you're going to knock somebody out of the top 12. I was using that all summer, so I know they
definitely should not be disappointed with that show at all.
No, and Colts and the Academy and Madison, like all these corps performing at a really high level. I just want to mention a couple others. We have to talk about Music City because they were so well loved. I mean, first year in world class, and they made such a mark, and everybody was talking about them. Like, I can't tell you how many times somebody would say, I'd say, how'd you like the show last night? Oh, it was great. This, blah, blah, blah. And Music City, like everybody was like, wow, they were really good. And they made a statement, and their show was real accessible. They won a lot of fan favorite awards all during the summer. So just kudos to them. I feel like they did what you're supposed to do, which is, they entered world class, and everybody was talking about it, and everybody liked them.
Awesome. Yeah, I never got a chance to see him this year, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, it was great. It was like a train thing, and everybody just loved it, and it was just a really likable. And the other corps I want to mention, two more. One is I want to mention Oregon Crusaders, who did their whole the show about The Shining and Red Rum, and that for them, I feel like they got everybody talking about them. Everybody was talking about that show and anticipating seeing it all summer. And that, when you are, a world-class corps that's trying to be noticed and work your way up, like everything, I feel like they really accomplished getting everybody to talk about them. And those creepy guard costumes dressed like the little girls. Like that, you know, I mean, I got a little creeped out. I thought, okay, well, this is working because I'm sure that's exactly the way they want me to feel. You know, I was just like, stay away from me, guard girls. I am not interviewing you.
Why is Tim running?
Yeah, really. And, I loved it. It was very cool because they had the red rum flags, but then when they spun them, you could see the murder. Like, you know, like they spun it one way, you were reading red rum, but you spun them the other way, you could read murder. It was really effectively done. That was a smart show. Is there anybody else you wanted to mention?
I did get a chance to see Santa Clara Cadets.
Yeah, they were amazing.
Just totally impressed with them. And there's like moments throughout the show, I was like, wow, that was really well put together. Yeah. Like the effect that they were going for, like super cool.
Yeah, and to think that they're achieving that level with, you know, younger performers, you know.
Right, exactly. And that's what I think we forget about because of how good a lot of these courses sound now. It's like, oh, these are the ones that don't travel the whole summer? Holy mackerel.
Yeah. Well, and I got to tell you, I also want to, you know, there's all these great shows down here, Blue Devils B, Troopers, Gold, Genesis, Pacific Crest. All these shows were wonderful. I want to mention the Spartans. I was really impressed with the Spartans. I think they had made this great accomplishment of making it into the Friday show. You know, they got to perform in the semifinals, and I think that was wonderful. I got to tell you, that Spartans color guard, I got to find out who that is. Like, who is that team? Because not only did I love this show, it was about Da Vinci's workshop. I loved this show, but I just thought, I sat there the whole time thinking, holy cow, this color guard is fantastic. I've been trying to research who it is. So if you're out there and you're a Spartans color guard person, contact me, Tim@marchingroundtable.com, because I want to talk to you.
If you stall a little bit more, I have the book here.
No. I looked it up. It's a guy named Lenny. I looked it up, but I couldn't figure out. I'm trying to figure out who the team is. Anyway, I just want to mention, because, you know, a corps that ends up in making it to the top 25 is a great accomplishment, you know, but I just wanted to mention, I thought the whole corps was wonderful, but that color guard, geez, like they were performing at a very high level. Yeah. All right. Well, anything about the season you want to say before we wrap this conversation up?
I don't think so. I mean, if anybody followed it this summer, they knew, like, oh my gosh, this was a great summer. Like, these are the corps I want to see. And there was, like, no disappointment when you saw them. But, yeah, I mean, it was just a great year. And I think Drum Corps is on the right path. And they're figuring out, like, okay, this didn't work a couple years ago. Or, like, we're finessing it to the point to, like, this is working. And I know can be a lot of naysayers about certain aspects of it, but when it all comes together for a show, I feel like it's working because it's more about how it's impacting the audience emotionally, and I feel like that's what they're starting to master.
I agree, and I think that all this new technology, they're figuring it out so it doesn't seem you know, like clunky or bothersome. And I'll say two things. One is I think the level of what the performers are doing, like the excellence that the performers are achieving, and all the way up and down watching shows early on Thursday, you know, and I'm still thinking, holy cow, these corps are performing at such a high level. So first off, the performers are doing things that are remarkable and are performing at such a level, but that also speaks to the level of instruction. You know, not only do we talk a lot about the design of these corps, but I got to tell you, people that are teaching the horn lines, instructing the drum lines, teaching the guard, teaching the movement, the marching, their level of instruction that these corps members are getting is so high. And me as an educator, it just makes me really, really happy. And I think everybody in the world of the drum corps should be really, really proud of how great the level of instruction is, how dedicated and talented all these, you know, performers are because of the level of instruction they're getting. So thank you. If you're somebody out there that spent the summer teaching and instructing and giving your time, thank you, because wow, what the level of instruction these students are getting, it's just really remarkable, because they couldn't be achieving these shows without somebody out there in the hot sun, you know, working with these corps day after day.
Exactly. And it's not just them too. Like, I feel like all around music education in this country has come up. So the talent of these kids coming in are a much higher level, and that's due to like the everyday band directors around the country.
You're absolutely right.
Like what they're doing is like they're like, here, like, look at this, like, go do your best with the drum corps now, because like you're obviously talented enough to do it.
Well, right, but you're right. It's this level of music instruction, music education they're getting at home at their own school from their private lessons, from their band directors, from their instructors. They're bringing that with them to the drum corps. So everybody that's out there teaching kids with music, marching, movement, color guard, congrats. Give yourself a pat on the back. This just feels like music education is achieving great things.
Yeah, and this is where it comes back to drum corps, is that the kids at home in band are being inspired by what they're seeing. They're like, I want to do that someday. So it's pushing them to push themselves too. And it's because of, in the circle of what you're talking about, the instructors and the members, and it just keeps feeding upon itself. The better it gets, the better it's just going to keep going to get.
Well, for those of us that love the marching arts, it's very, very exciting. So congrats to everybody. Sorry if we left anybody out. We didn't get to talk about you, but it was a great year. John, this was a fun discussion. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Tim.
You can hear more conversations about the DCI season for supporters of the Marching Roundtable and Tone Deaf Comics on Patreon. If you give as little as $2 a month, you can hear these other special podcasts at patreon.com. And watch for 11 more podcasts about the DCI season coming soon, including interviews with fans in Indy and behind-the-scenes conversations with the design staffs of 10 of the top drum corps this season. You can watch video versions of these interviews right now for free at marchingartseducation.com. Just click on the DCI Design Staff Interviews logo. These conversations will also be available as podcasts very soon. Keep up with upcoming topics and guests by following the Marching Roundtable on social media, including the new Marching Roundtable Facebook group, where you can join in interesting discussions about the activity. And get our biweekly newsletter by signing up at marchingroundtable.com. Thanks again to the sponsor of this podcast, guardcloset.com, found at guardcloset.com. Thanks to John for joining me on this podcast, and thanks to you for listening. I invite you to see all of the services I offer at my website at timhinton.com. This includes music for marching groups, drill writing services, show consultation, podcast, webinars, video instruction, and coursework. timhinton.com.
If you're a business that works with band directors, marching bands, color guards, or drum lines, you should consider sponsoring an episode of the Marching Roundtable. Our listeners are the exact audience you're trying to reach, and with thousands of podcast downloads each month, it's a great way to directly reach your target audience. For more information, click on the Sponsorship Opportunities link at marchingroundtable.com or email Tim at marchingroundtable.com. You can grow your business and help support what we're doing here on the podcast. Thanks.